Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living on Blockchain. Today, we are going to speak to Temujin Louie. He's the CEO of Wanchain, and he's a leader in the decentralized blockchain interoperability space. He's also the creator of the industry's first decentralized cross-chain bridge. In this particular episode, we talk about simplifying blockchain for mass adoption, how breaking down complex blockchain concepts can make Web3 more accessible to everyday users and businesses, and also the rule of interoperability and how it is so important, why seamless cross-chain communication is key to making blockchain more user-friendly and widely adopted. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Let's deep dive right in.
Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for making the time once again to speak to me today. How have you been? How are you doing?
Thanks, Tarusha. It's really great to be back. I have been doing very well, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Likewise. So can you tell us a little about what has changed so far and what are you up to currently, just so that our newer listeners get some context and then we can start from there.
Sure, absolutely. For those of you who might not be aware, my name is Temujin Louie. I'm the CEO of Wanchain, and Wanchain is a blockchain interoperability project. We're in fact the oldest decentralized interoperability project in the industry. So that means we have some cross-chain bridges. We have general message passing. I'm sure we're going to talk about all these things in the conversation, but yes, we're all about making blockchain speak to another blockchain so that developers can create cross-chain application.
So this is very, very exciting, and we had talked a little about what you guys are building in depth the last time you were here on the show. Can you tell us about the newer developments that you're more excited about at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few different layers to an interoperability project. So, the first thing that you have to consider is which chains do you support? So, this is always an area of excitement for us. We are interoperability nerds in a way. But today we support more than 40 different chains, and we put a big focus on supporting non-EVMs as well as EVMs. So, of course, you would expect us, and we do integrate all the major EVMs, Ethereum, Ethereum L2s, all the ones at the top of the market cap list. We basically support, but we also support things like the Bitcoin network directly and Solana and Cardano, XRP Ledger, a huge number of these major non-EVMs. So that's kind of the first thing. So we're always integrating new chains. Recently, I think since our last call, I think we have added Solana. But we've also added things like Polygon ZKVM, Linnea, and that's kind of one level. On the product side of things, we also have launched a few new developments since we last spoke. Historically, of course, with interoperability, it's really been about moving value from one chain to another. So the listeners can probably imagine this. They have USDT on Ethereum and they want USDT on Solana, so they use a cross-chain bridge. So we've had this from the start. We were actually the first ones to have this in a decentralized way, all the way back in 2018. Since our last conversation, we've also launched what we are calling Export. So Export is a data transfer protocol, which basically means rather than moving value from one chain to another, we're simply moving data. And this allows developers more flexibility to design kind of innovative cross-chain products because they can decide based on their smart contracts what to do with the data once they receive it. So it's really about moving arbitrary data from one chain to another. We've also recently launched what we're calling Xflows, and this is our cross-chain swap. So this actually
Okay.
makes use of our message passing protocol or our data transfer protocol. And it is as it sounds. You can swap one asset to another asset on a different chain. So you could do ETH on Ethereum to BNB on Binance Chain, for example.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. This is a lot of change that you've talked about. So first, I would like you to tell me a little about just the overview of the current state of interoperability in Web3. Like, what are your thoughts on it? And then I want to really, really talk about your exports and flow that you've mentioned and how these are different or similar to existing solutions, or perhaps giving analogies with Web2. I think that'll help really cement your vision in the listener's head as well. But first, let's talk a little about the macro overview of the current state of interoperability in Web3 and what is your opinion?
Yeah, so today, interoperability, we continue to progress incrementally. Let's say we haven't had a major revolution in interoperability in a little while, but we're always making improvements. So today, it's pretty easy to move an asset from one chain to another, or even some arbitrary data from one chain to another. So this is, you can say, from a functional point of view, solved. But there's always, the devils are always in the details. So the question, how is this being secured? Is this being done in a decentralized way, or is there a centralized entity copy pasting, data from one chain to another? So here, there's a wide spectrum of solutions. You have things like Wanchain, who are, extremists on the decentralized side of things, and you also have other providers, particularly in the enterprise space, that are fully centralized, and they're not pretending to not be that. So it's fine. So there's a lot of different approaches here, and that's kind of where the industry, in terms of interoperability, is still somewhat struggling because we all sort of agree that there needs to be some sort of standardization. But anyone who has, ever worked in standards development, like Wanchain does, it's this very slow process to kind of get everyone to agree on a particular standard. So this is of the kind of work that I would say end users maybe don't necessarily see or feel, but really is very important. And in my opinion, anyways, these types of standards, industry-wide standards, are really what's going to unlock the full potential of blockchain technology.
This is very interesting because I think the last time too, when we talked a little about your vision, the product, I think interoperability, obviously, we both kind of agreed is something that has seen incremental change over the years, but no solid, solution, one solution that can really take over perhaps, or can be like, a standardized solution for everything that comes in the space. But I think because of the inherent quality of Web3 and how dynamic it is, I think that would be hard to come by. But I am very bullish about these incremental changes because ultimately it's about giving users a better experience. And I think interoperability really does help with that. And to that effect, I would love for you to shed a little more light on X flows first, perhaps, and exports as well, because I do want to understand how does the tech work. Can you give us an analogy from the web to to make this easier for folks in Web3 as well as in Web2 to understand? And what would the kind of how does it solve in a way like X flows or export? How does it solve in a way that perhaps older solutions were not able to? So a breakdown, perhaps one by one, of these new developments would be wonderful.
Sure, absolutely. Let me start with export, actually, because Xflows is built using export. So it'll be helpful to understand what export itself is doing. So as I mentioned, we launched export. This is our cross-chain data transfer protocol. So I think I mentioned at the start of our conversation here, previously, when you're thinking about bridging in Web3 or DeFi, it's really about moving value or assets. So it's moving your USDT from one chain and getting it on a different chain, USDT on Ethereum to USDC or to USDT on Solana, for example. Now, this is fine. It does serve a purpose. But if you are thinking about mainstream adoption or just, full, let's say the internet of Web3, full companies kind of running their whole business on blockchain, you need more than just moving an asset. There's lot of data transfer that happens on the internet, for example. So you can think about it that way. We need a way for the different blockchains to simply be able to access one another's data in order to create this kind of wide area network of blockchains so that we can have these really top tier types of applications that are simultaneously running on multiple different blockchains. So this is all about creating this sort of like meta network of blockchains and making sure that the information can flow from one to the other. So this is what X does. Using kind of our cross-chain stack, basically it's fully decentralized like all of our other products, and it's only focused on moving data from chain A to chain B without changing the essence of that data. So you can think about it just like copy paste. Now we copy it in a decentralized way, paste it to the other chain. Now, why is this useful? Well, we can move any type of data basically with a few kind of size limitations on how much data can be written on a particular blockchain. But for our purposes, let's say we can move any type of data from one chain to another. Then these Web3 developers or even Web2 developers, enterprises, whoever, they focus solely on what they want to accomplish, what they want to serve to their users. They design those smart contracts, and those smart contracts basically automate a reaction based on the data that it receives. So you can think about it like on chain one, there's a few user transactions, data gets emitted, it wants to target another chain, export comes in, copies that data to the destination chain, a smart contract there receives it, and it continues the kind of business logic flow. So you can string this together to support any number of blockchains, and you can really have these kind of more robust cross-chain experiences. Now, this all sounds, very conceptual. So I can give you a few examples of the type of unique things that, us, but other third-party developers have built using this technology. I guess one that is kind of interesting to me is like there's a project you might have heard of called Energy. So they are relatively old as well. They're really ultra focused on ensuring that they have a theft-free environment, let's say. A blockchain where users cannot steal users' funds. Now, one kind of component of this is that via kind of governance system, they have the ability to freeze on their own blockchain. And this obviously creates some complications in a Web3 scenario, a fully decentralized scenario wherein, if you're a bridge and you're moving assets to their chain, you obviously don't want those assets to be frozen. It kind of breaks the whole system. So they kind of need a real type of custom solution with custom business logic. And this is what Export allowed. So they used Export to build a bridge for themselves, connecting several chains, but let's say Ethereum to Energy. And anytime that a bridge transaction wants to remove assets from Energy, then there is a 3-day delay built into the bridging process. Now, it's still totally decentralized. It's all done via smart contract logic, but they can have these kind of more unique types of kind of business logic that are built into their product. So they design it themselves. Export purely focuses on securing the cross-chain data and anything else that can be done via smart contract. Another example that is kind of cool is a project called BitRock. So, a lot of these smaller or newer EVMs, maybe they launch and, everyone wants stable coins, but Tether and Circle, they tend not to issue these stable coins on smaller chains. They really wait until they can support billions of dollars of liquidity. It takes a while for a blockchain to get there. Even third-party bridges, there's some risk in integrating these types of smaller blockchains. So something like Export allows these blockchains to kind of create their own wrap version of USDT or USDC on their own blockchain. So using Export, they can get users to lock USDT on Ethereum, for example, emit data, in this case, a confirmation that or a proof that this USDT is actually locked in Ethereum, and then it triggers their own minting contract on their own blockchain to allow kind of this USDT value to flow on their own blockchain. So these are just a kind of couple examples of people that have already built with X. I think the point here is really kind of whenever you need sort of custom business logic, then something like Export is super, super useful. So obviously this type of stuff is important to enterprises who might have different type of regulatory requirements, who need a lot of proofs before kind of moving on to the next step of their business flow. So this type of data transfer protocol is extremely powerful.
I would imagine so. So can you, the first thing when you mentioned that, okay, this is like a data transfer protocol, I could think of I thought of IPFS, and can you tell me how perhaps this works differently? Because I think the comparison would help our listeners get a better idea on how this works on the technical side.
Versus like an asset bridge, you mean?
Yes, but because I immediately thought of IPFS, which is obviously for file transfer, and so how can you tell us a little about the differences, and can you compare perhaps those two, your services versus something that already exists, and that would, I think, help give us a better idea about the technical aspect as well.
Sure. So let me get into the technicals a little bit more. So with Export, like I said, it's only focused on moving data. So the project who's building with Export on the source chain, they will design a smart contract. This smart contract will emit that piece of data that it wants to transfer to another chain. Then the Export relayer, which is a group of decentralized nodes, it's the same nodes that have been, securing all of Wanchain's crossing solutions for all of these years. We just recently crossed, 7 years of interrupted uptime. So these, we can call them bridge nodes, or we can call them an off-chain relayer. This set of nodes detects that this piece of data has been emitted, and then they reach consensus that they're all seeing the same thing, and then they are writing that data to the target destination address on the destination chain. Once that data is written there, then that project has also deployed a smart contract that takes that data and has some sort of reaction based on, the product that they are trying to design. Now, there can be lots of different data here. You can really put anything you want. You can not, more than just a destination address. You can just put really arbitrary data, different types of proofs, all really depending on the use case of the product in question. It can be different types of kind of identification, for example, or really the only limit is the imagination of the developer themselves. Now, this is different from some existing solutions. I'll just focus more on Wanchain solutions because these are the ones I'm most familiar with, and that I feel most comfortable talking about. So with the previous type of asset bridging, basically these are designed to be almost, let's say, as dumb as possible. So the user would lock an asset on a source chain. It would emit an event saying, "Hey, we have some assets locked here." Our decentralized bridge node group or this off-chain relayer would detect that event, and then they would directly trigger a smart contract on the destination chain to, unlock the assets and send it to the user. But because these are designed to be basically as stupid as possible, the only kind of data that is getting emitted is just this event on the EVM that is
Hmm.
confirming that something is locked. So as soon, you can think about it this way, as soon in the previous solutions, as soon as a transaction enters the bridge, it becomes dumb. All it can do then is complete itself. It can't carry any instructions with it. Whereas with something like export, you can send as many instructions as you want to the destination smart contract, and then it can use that data, no matter how complex or simple it is, to continue the transaction flow. So you can think about things like supply chains that might have to go through all sorts of different chains. It could be like a 3 or 4 chain system. Something like this was never possible before with just like an asset transfer bridge because it was ultimately, of course, it's the focus is always security, but with an asset bridge, you go in and basically anything besides the core function disappears at that point. Nothing can get transferred beyond that core activity, which is moving USDT from chain A to chain B. With something like export, it carries all sorts of data with it so that you can have more complicated outcomes.
Okay, so let me see if I get this right. So, your solution is perhaps different from, IPFS, which is like an open system to manage data, again, without a central server, because with IPFS, it's just file sharing, and you're sharing and storing that data, perhaps in a distributed hash table. But with your solution, this data is executable or programmable in nature. It retains those qualities. So even if it is being moved, it can still, be programmable. Is that a decent enough way to put it?
Yeah, you can put it that way. Another way that I like to describe it is, the programmability
Hmm.
exists on the smart contracts on the source and
Right.
destination chain that the projects themselves, the developers themselves are deploying.
Right.
But if you chain different smart contracts together, you need, for example, output data from the first smart contract, which
Hmm.
then becomes the input data for the second smart contract.
Right.
Now, with these smart contracts are on different chains, you have a bit of a problem. If it's all on one chain, it's easy. The smart contracts
Yeah.
just send the data to themselves directly. On different
Hmm.
chains, you then use something like export. It just takes the output data, no matter what it is. It could be anything based on what the developer decided it was going to be. Then it delivers that to the second smart contract where it serves as the input data. The programmability of that is totally dictated by the smart contract that the project developer themselves have designed. So they just accept the what was the output data and is now the input data. They have full confidence that this has not been perverted in any way. It is accurate to the original data on the original chain, and then the programmability of it is totally in their control.
This is very interesting. And like you said, that, this is very pertinent, very important, and I think a very powerful solution indeed that you guys have created. So, can you tell me a little about the kind of smart contracts that have been integrated so far with some use cases on this solution so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little more than a dozen projects that I've built with it so far.
Okay.
I gave a couple
Right.
examples with
Yeah.
the energy and the
Energy.
and the Bitrock. We also
Yeah.
have one that we have revealed called Idexa, and this one's really focused on kind of enterprise use cases. We also did a case study with Stellar XLM. So this one they used export to do a kind of like a NFT transfer flow.
Okay.
So really, there's all sorts of different things you can do. In-house, of course, we wanted our own kind of showcase. So this is where X flows comes in. So as I mentioned before, the Wanchain bridge prior, was just a standard token bridge. It just moves USDT on chain A to USDT to chain B. Now we have X flows. It uses export to enable cross-chain swaps. So here maybe we can give a little more detail about the type of input and output data that I was talking about. So let's say you wanted to do ETH on Ethereum to BNB on Binance Chain, for example. Now, it can't just be a simple asset bridge because if you just throw ETH into the bridge, like I mentioned, like I explained, it becomes kind of a dumb transaction at that point. It'll spit ETH out somewhere else and not really know how to proceed because there's no
Hmm.
instructions attached to it. There's no output or input data. So in this case, using export, when the ETH goes into the swap, it also includes all sorts of information such as here's the destination address, here's the asset that I want to swap ETH for, here's my minimum tolerance for slippage, any number of things. Here's like if I also need some gas token on the destination chain. So all these different kind of variables that you can include in the transaction. Then it enters the Xflows product. It knows, okay, this user wants to swap ETH to B, but is not willing to accept any slippage beyond this amount. And they also need some gas. Well, they also need some gas, let's say. So whatever variables. So then it'll swap according to these instructions and then deliver the asset on the destination chain. So the way Xflows works, it actually conducts the swapping on the Wanchain L1 blockchain,
Hmm.
a long running blockchain, very, very cheap in terms of gas. So that's why we do it there. So these user transactions, they are thinking, okay, I'm going ETH on Ethereum to BNB on Binance Chain. In the background, it's actually going ETH to the Wanchain L1,
Hmm.
swap in an on-chain liquidity pool to WAN, then swap WAN to BNB, and then bridge the BNB to the destination chain, for example. That would be a kind of standard flow. So you're able to have this level of complexity that is totally abstracted from the user who from their perspective, they just want ETH to BNB. They don't need to know that the Wanchain L1 even exists. They don't have to worry
Hmm.
about gas on any of these chains. All this data is just included in the export system so that we can kind of these more complex flows in a still kind of a totally decentralized way. So this is kind of what we
Awesome.
built in the first case with export, as just as kind of a proof of concept. Of course, there's far more complex things that one can build than a cross-chain swap, but that's what Xflows is today.
Yeah, okay. This is awesome. And then now, if you had to, obviously this improves the, user experience for the end user as well as for developers, I would believe. Can you perhaps tell us how do you perceive the improvement? Like what do you think would be like the top three USPs for developers who wish to integrate with Explores and Export as
Yeah.
vis-a-vis, the existing solutions at the moment?
Yeah, of course. So for us, or for me, I would say, I really think that export is, excuse me, excellent solution for small and newer chain. If you look at kind of some other competing protocols out there, a lot of times they're not quite scalable enough to be able to support or quickly support a lot of these small chains. We purposely designed export to be able to support smaller developers that maybe just have an interesting idea. Maybe they don't have, ton of funding, but they have an idea and they have a cross-chain vision. So we make it a priority to support a lot of these kind of smaller, newer, more experimental chain support. So the original design had in mind. So if there's anyone listening out there who is a developer on a small chain and or has a kind of small chain or new chain in mind in terms of where they want to spread their cross-chain product, definitely do get in touch. We are more than happy, very excited to support small builders. Similarly, anyone who does share this kind of vision in having industry-wide standards, export is definitely for you as well. So again, here, I think we talked about more than this time, but Wanchain is, deeply involved in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, where the
Hmm.
chair of the interoperability work group there since our last call, I think we have published the full version 1.0 of the interoperability standards. And so export is designed to be fully compliant with those standards. And similarly, since our last conversation, we we're one of the founding projects of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And so this is also kind of a channel wherein these sort of EEA compliant protocols can be kind of be open sourced and worked in the open with developers there as well. So these are kind of the types of open source standardization, this type of ethos. If you're into this type of stuff, export is also for you because export itself is designed to with these things in mind.
The more I hear about it, the more excited I feel about this particular product and new development, on one side, one chain side, because I do think, like I mentioned before, that these are very important and powerful solutions that are required in this time in our industry, because like you mentioned, there are so many L2s that keep springing up, and I think this kind of makes it better for the user as well as for the developers, because it makes it more efficient, the entire process wherein they're trying to build on their vision. So in terms of the kind of application, you've already mentioned, that obviously this can be used for more complicated and complex applications as well, other than just swaps. And we talked heavily about swaps because that's an easier example to give and for listeners to assimilate. But are there any kind of particular projects in a particular niche that you are looking to integrate, and you have a soft spot for?
Well, we definitely have a soft spot for non-EVMs. So that's kind of
Hmm.
another advantage for export where from the start, again, the vision is to support more than just EVMs. So for example, the first one is Cardano,
Hmm.
but these will be expanded to other non-EVMs as well. This also aligns with kind of our standards efforts, even though the EEA stands for Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. The standard itself, expands beyond EVM
Hmm.
because basically, so long as Bitcoin exists, there's going to have to be room for non-EVMs as well. And of course, there's tons of other non-EVMs. If you look at the top 20 market cap, more than half of them are non-EVM blockchains. So
Hmm.
non-EVM is very important to the industry, I think. So that's definitely something that's always going to be of interest to Wanchain.
Awesome, awesome. So now, when because you're talking about chain and integrations, you mentioned that you guys have integrated with Solana since we've last spoken. What were your reasons to choose Solana as one of the next chains that you guys are integrating with? Or are you looking to integrate with other chains as well?
Yeah, we're always integrating with new chains. I would say over the past year or year and a half, we've kind of made a conscious effort to not contribute to one of the major problems of interoperability, which is the kind of refragmentation or the gerrymandering of the blockchain ecosystem. Now, what I mean by that is, especially in the last cycle back in what 21, 22, we had all these bridges that popped up and all of them started minting their own versions of their wrapped assets. And this really had a negative impact on the industry overall, because the bridges without these industry-wide standards, one bridge is incompatible with another bridge. So with these bridges minting a wrapped USDT, another bridge also mints a wrapped USDT. Then on a single chain, you have multiple versions of wrapped USDT, but you can't use them with one another. And it really just was a big fractured mess. So these days with Wanchain, we integrate new chains on basically one of three metrics. One, if you're a small new chain that wants to build with export, we got your back. Just reach out to us and we're going to do everything we can to help you because we love seeing these types of new ideas and developments. Two, for our kind of in-house, let's say consumer products, things like the Wanchain Bridge and Xflows. Here we are targeting always chains that have a blue chip asset, meaning something like a native USDT or a native USDC, or in the cases of these like Ethereum L2s, we treat the canonical L2 bridged version of those assets as equivalent to the L1 asset. So if you're an L2 or if you have a native USDT or USDC, then we're very likely to integrate you as well. And then third is if you're a non-EVM of some note, then these are obviously kind of more intensive to integrate. It's not as simple as an EVM, but we're always working on at least two or three non-EVM integrations at a time. Right now, we are working on Sui and Ton, as well as a couple other exciting ones.
Awesome. So, obviously, like we've mentioned many times since we've talked, there have been many very, very exciting developments on the Wanchain side. Can you tell me what is next? What's the next big milestone that you guys are looking to crack?
Yeah, we have a few things that are not very far off from release that I can share a little bit about. One is our first intent-based cross-chain solution will be launched. So for those of you who might not be super familiar with intent-based solutions, it's
Hmm.
basically abstract away some of this complexity from the user. So if you give you just a somewhat of a overly complicated example, but I think it'll illustrate the point pretty well. You have all these kind of rebasing ETHs out there. And let's say the user wants to kind of unwrap this rebased ETH to get their real ETH out of it. This could be like a 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 transaction process, quite complicated. With something like an intent-based solution, the user then would just be able to kind of emit out onto the chain, hey, I have this multiple rebased ETH and I want the underlying asset back immediately, and I'm willing to pay a small fee. Then a filler, just it's a permissionless system. So someone who is willing to take that fee will just basically front that that user, the underlying asset, the underlying ETH, take the multiple rebased ETH, and then they will be in charge of kind of going through the process of unwrapping that. Our implementation will be a little simpler than that very convoluted example. To start, it'll really be more focused on super high speed cross-chain transactions. So a user will be able to kind of emit their intent, basically saying, I want to bridge 10,000 USDT from Polygon to Solana. Normally, this transaction will take 20 plus minutes because Polygon is slow to finality. But with an intent-based solution, someone then can come in and say, sure, I'll take that small fee and immediately give you the 10,000 USDT on Solana. So from the user's perspective, this is now, it turned a 20-minute experience into a 30-second experience. And then in return for taking on that fee, the filler will go through the standard slower bridging process to kind of reimburse them. So this is kind of an intent-based solution that we'll be releasing soon, which should be pretty cool. And we're also working, these are a little bit further off, but expanding X flows to more non-EVMs. We want to do kind of a native Bitcoin integration there, so you can swap Bitcoin on BTC to any of these assets on the other supported chains. So like BTC to ETH, or BTC to Sol, or BTC to AVAX, whatever you want, just in one click. So this is coming too, as well as a few other kind of cross-chain applications. Now that we have export launched, it also opens up, yes, for third-party developers to really get creative, but it also re-energizes our own developers to kind of finally launch some of these products. We've had these ideas for a while, but we were never willing to sacrifice on the decentralized side of things. So now that export is out there in the wild, it really unlocks the potential for our own products as well. And I'll just add one quick thing here.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly when this is going to be published, but for at least the next couple of weeks, we have an ongoing competition.
Yep.
So if anyone wants to go try the new Xflows, it's xflows.wanchain.org. You just do any cross-chain transaction you want, and it makes you eligible to win as parts of a $10,000 prize pool. So really nothing to lose. All you have to do is any transaction you want, and it makes you eligible just to kind of try out these seamless cross-chain applications.
Super exciting. I'll sure to put in the link that you mentioned in the description of the podcast, and we'll try to push this one out really quickly so that users and your users and our listeners can participate and be eligible to win from the prize pool. This is very interesting what you've mentioned. It really piqued my interest. You are exploring intent-based cross-chain transactions. Can you perhaps, if you had to explain this simply to our listeners in a way that they would be really able to grasp this, how would you explain it? And then, perhaps I would like to talk a little more about how intent-based interoperability compares to, say, the existing solutions that are there in terms of bridges and liquidity pools as well. But first, if you could explain it in a simple way, perhaps in a sentence or two, what exactly do you mean when you say intent-based cross-chain transaction?
Yeah, sure. So intent-based cross-chain is based on the idea that the user generally doesn't care about how things are done. They only care about what they want. So for example, I have USDC on Solana and I want ETH on Ethereum. And these solutions basically boil down to me, the user, will just pay someone else to do it for me. You can think about it in a kind of a Web2 context. Let's say you are planning a trip. You're based in the US. You're planning a trip to Europe. So you have US dollars. You're going to need some euros. Okay, if you're going to do that yourself, it's kind of annoying. You have to go, let's say, to the bank or the currency exchange counter.
Hmm.
And then you have to go and give them the US dollars, and then they'll give you the euros, and then you're on your way. Okay, maybe you don't want to do that. Well, luckily you have a friend who just happens to already have euros on them. So you're like, hey, how about I give you $10 and then I'll give you this USD. You'll give me your euros, and that's it for me. Then the friend is like, sure, yeah, I'll make us $10 profit, and then I can decide if I'm going to go through that process and go to the bank and swap those USD to euros to kind of reimburse myself. So it's really just kind of around this idea that you can just pay someone else to take the hardship and the complications off of your hands for a small fee because you what you want and you want to get there as quickly as possible and as simply as possible.
I think that's a great example. The currency example is a good example. I think it will really make what intent-based interoperability means, and I think people will be able to understand it. So thank you for sharing that analogy. Now, can you tell me a little about how intent-based interoperability compares to, say, existing solutions, like perhaps bridges or liquidity pools, at the moment?
Yeah, I think my opinion on this is maybe slightly controversial in
Hmm.
the interoperability space.
We love
You know,
that.
it is one, yeah, it is being presented right now as a kind of innovation
Hmm.
in interoperability. I personally don't see it like that. I think it's really more of a band-aid. It's right now we have all of these, let's say, fundamental problems with interoperability. My own bias saying because we have this lack of industry standards. But regardless, I think no one is out there pretending that interoperability is already perfect. So intent-based, I view it more as like a product level band-aid. It doesn't actually address any of the fundamental issues that we're working on in interoperability. But while we are kind of making slow incremental improvements at the fundamental issue level, at the core infrastructure level, we kind of just want to hide these issues from end users and make their experience a little more palatable. So this is where intent based comes in. You can abstract away a lot of these complications, a lot of
Hmm.
these headaches that are involved with, standard bridging. It doesn't replace standard bridging, it just hides it from the user. And then someone who, like I said, is willing to take your $10, make a bit of profit, and go through those steps on your behalf. That's really what intent based does.
Hmm. Right, and I think people or users tend to be very open to the idea of adding convenience to their life. So I think that is important as we move forward, and a lot of these products are trying to find a PMF. But ultimately, I think a product that would find PMF in this day and age is a product that, or a chain for that matter, or any technology. Basically, that is kind of adding convenience to the user's life, and that is what this kind of tech does for the user. And I think that's again very powerful.
Yeah, and I love what you just said because that's totally aligned with my thoughts. Something like intent-based solutions, there's a clear product market fit, but I think
Mm,
the key word there is product. I think a
mm,
lot of our issues as an industry in terms of interoperability has been because we've been trying to replace core infrastructure with product.
yeah.
Whereas I think ultimately we'll get to a point where we have ultra secure core infrastructure, there's industry-wide standards, and the only thing that matters here is security. It can be slow, it can be inconvenient, but it's maximally secure. Now, this unlocks a lot of possibilities for developers, but of course, the users are not going to be able to, or not going to be willing to kind of interact with something that is that inconvenient. So that's where you have things like intent-based and other kind of products that can be built on top of this core infrastructure. And then that's where you're kind of looking for this product market fit, where, you're really kind of focusing on the needs of the user and making it as enjoyable an experience as possible. So intent-based is this great example of something that can exist at the product level, so long
Mm,
as it doesn't come at the cost of the core infrastructure. Then everything is beautiful. Because like I said, right now it is getting better, but let's say like a few years ago, definitely, you just have all these different bridge providers that they're all securing their bridge in different ways based on their own kind of opinions. That's why we have seen a lot of these hacks, because a lot of these opinions, maybe we're not prioritizing security, but it was kind of being presented in lieu of the actual core infrastructure that we need to connect these different blockchains. So this type of product as core infrastructure, I think is, yeah, it's garbage idea. We've proven time and time again that it doesn't work and people get hurt
Yeah.
when we build this way. But yeah, intent-based as a product, beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's zoom out a little bit, and again, I think this is something that we touched upon very briefly in our last conversation, but I would like to talk a little about this again. There has been growing discussion about AI and blockchain. Obviously, from you, I would love to gain perspective about decentralized AI and how does it kind of intersect with interoperability. How do you think, do you really think that AI would be playing a role in optimizing cross-chain transactions in the future? If so, then how? This is more on, a little zoomed out question, but I would love to get your perspective because you've been working in the space for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I have been paying attention to this DeFi or DeFi.
Yeah,
Um,
DeFi. Yeah.
Yes, deep AI. And yeah, I definitely think this is going to kind of manifest, certainly. But I would
Hmm.
say it's not so much that it's the AI kind of improving the interoperability side of things. It's more the other way around. It's the interoperability that's going to be enabling these kind of DeFi use cases. So I think the one that everyone is really thinking about right now is really kind of yield chasing across a bunch of different chains. There's yield opportunities all over the place. If you want to kind of min-max that using some sort of AI implementation, yeah, that's makes sense. You can see how that's done. You deploy your capital, you send it to a bot, and that bot is kind of chasing yields for you to kind of maximize your profit as well as compete with other people's AI bots. But if we don't have the interoperability layer in place such that these AI bots have both full access to all of these chains, full knowledge of the kind of yields available on these chains, as well as kind of relatively quick and seamless cross-chain transactions, then it's really going to kind of short circuit the effectiveness of this DeFi. The bot might be then limited to just a small handful of chains, maybe these major chains, these EVM, these L2s, where there's kind of multiple bridging options already in place. So you could probably have these bots finagle a way to kind of maximize your yield a little, but you're not going to reach this kind of like pure AI efficiency that people imagine if bots are not able to kind of just you move quickly through all of these different chains, and that includes both EVMs and non-EVMs, both large and small chains. Because once you're in a world where kind of it's AI bot versus AI bot, even the smallest little thing is going to really give one or the edge over the other. It's not so dissimilar to how kind of market makers fight. They're fighting over kind of just fractions of a cent, but it all
Right.
really adds up. So you can kind of see
Yeah.
that in a more decentralized way with these AI bots, but so long as the interoperability infrastructure isn't there and robust with several layers of failure, it's really going to short circuit the development of DeFi. I think you can just imagine you have this great, or your AI bot has this great multi-chain yield strategy. They're ready to go. Time is money. Time is of the essence in this. You got to go quick, and then during the flow, let's say the cross-chain transaction gets stuck. Really kind of
Hmm.
will totally destroy this bot's ability to really kind of maximize yield. It'll also, probably cost the user a bit of end money. And, once a user loses money a few times, they're going to lose trust in the system as a whole.
Right.
Even if, let's say, it wasn't the AI bot's fault, that level of nuance is probably going to be lost to most users who are going to be trying to use this. So, yeah, interoperability, I think, is going to be needed to really allow these deep AI to flourish.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. You kind of flipped my question on its head. But yeah, this is something that definitely, you are paying attention to, and so am I. I think it's an exciting space to keep your eyes on because I see that I foresee that a lot is going to happen here. So it's going to be very interesting. Tim, again, this has been such a great conversation that I just saw the time, and we are almost done with the hour. And it flew by. This is very exciting. What you're building is very exciting. I can't wait to try it. I can't wait to participate in the competition that you guys are organizing. But because we are running short of time, I would do some quick takes, perhaps. So a few questions. Like I had 4, 5 questions for some quick takes. Perhaps you can give one sentence answers, the one word answers for these. So let me start with those. So my first one here for quick takes was one blockchain trend that you think is overhyped.
Intent based.
Really? You really think that is overhyped?
I think that we're very close to repeating previous mistakes where intent-based solutions are being put forward as core infrastructure rather than
Hmm.
purely being products, which is, in my opinion, what they both are and should be.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a very, like you said, there is a fine line between, product and just the core infrastructure bit. And I think like you said, we've made that mistake earlier as an industry, and let's hope that we don't really repeat those same mistakes. But yeah,
Yes,
I
fingers
think.
crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think what you said is right. Like with your explanation after that, it does make sense. Okay, so a Web3 project, perhaps besides your own chain that you're really excited about.
I think I answered this differently last time, but I'm going to go the opposite direction with a big. So I really love what OKX is doing with their Web3 wallet.
Hmm.
It's kind of we've blinked and we're actually pretty close to having this kind of like super app in
Yeah.
blockchain right now.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
they've done excellent work with that. So very impressed.
In one word, describe the future of interoperability.
Inevitable.
Nice. So if Wanchain could perhaps integrate with any non-blockchain tech, what would it be?
I guess I would have to say Web2 internet.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a rite of passage. I think that is something that we've talked about a lot on this show, how all of these blockchain solutions that we keep creating, they do need to find a way to integrate with the Web2 solutions or the tech, so that it becomes more seamless for the user. Is that your perspective as well?
Yeah, yeah. I almost said AI and decided actually no, that's not my true answer because
Yeah.
interoperability, Web3, blockchain to blockchain, it's all great, but it's not like we're going to blink and then one day all the existing legacy systems are going to just disappear and everything is going to
Right.
be on blockchain. So you need interoperability, not only public to public blockchains, you need public to private blockchains, you need private to private, you also need legacy to blockchain. You need Web 2 to Web 3. And this is a very important piece of the puzzle, or else, we'll isolate our entire industry. It could be beautifully interoperable, internally to Web 3, but if we can't connect properly to Web 2, it'll be very difficult to envision the world transitioning to blockchain tech.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's pretty much bang on, hitting the nail right on the head. Okay, so this has been lovely, very enlightening, and I think this gave me a lot of tools and stuff to try out. So in the coming days, I'll be busy doing that. So thank you for taking out the time once again to speak to me. But there are 2 more questions. I think I'll ask you about your last parting thoughts, and one question that again, which is inevitable on the show. We've talked about it, and you've given your suggestions perhaps earlier for how users can truly start living on blockchain. But if I had to spin that question a little on its head, how would you perhaps suggest users to not be afraid, of the interoperability aspect can be very, very intimidating, I think, for new users, in once they are using Web3 applications. What would be your suggestions for them to perhaps not be intimidated by this mammoth beast of interoperability? Where would you suggest they should begin so that they don't get lost?
It's phrased funnily. I don't think they'll be able to not get lost yet. But I would
Hmm.
say don't be afraid of that fact. Just get off the centralized exchange
Hmm.
and try to recreate those core functions. So you use a centralized exchange to swap from it to another.
Right.
Take a small amount of money, try to do that in with a deck, and then you're
Hmm.
gonna encounter where the pain points are, and it'll probably force you to Google how to get
Hmm.
past those pain points. And that's really kind of the only way right now. But I would say don't be afraid of getting lost. Just be smart and don't throw your entire net worth at anything until comfortable doing it. So start with like $10 and then just go and figure out the flow. And you'll be comfortable with these things once you're more familiar with them and once you have used them once or twice.
Absolutely. I think this is good advice for life as well. Uh, don't be afraid to get lost, and don't throw your entire net worth there. But yeah, start small, and you can learn by doing. So that seems
Yeah.
like a really wonderful way to wrap this up. Any parting thoughts? Anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Please put that in right here so that we can wrap this up.
Sure, I would just say do keep an eye on what Wanchain is doing. We've got a lot of stuff planned. As always, we're one of the more active teams, I think, over the last few years. So we're always shipping, always bringing in new products. And I would invite you all to join us. Follow us on Twitter at wanchain_org or on Telegram at Wanchain Chat, where we are always having discussions about the future of interoperability and just having a good time. So invite you all to join us.
Awesome, awesome. We'll put that in the description as well. Thank you so much, Tim, for taking out the time to speak to me today. This has been a really wonderful chat. I'm hoping that we'll do another follow-up soon where you guys would have created more products that are pertinent and powerful.
Yep. Thanks a lot for having me. I always like coming on for these chats. Thanks a lot.